When legends start bleeding into reality. The Zalthari Dominion did not fear myths. They catalogued them. Every civilization they conquered eventually produced stories about ancient terrors, hidden gods, or invisible warriors in the dark between stars. The Dominion's historians had a simple explanation: fear creates folklore, and folklore is what weak minds invent when they lose wars they don't understand. So when reports first surfaced about something called humans, the Dominion did what it always did. It ignored them. Until it couldn't. The first expedition disappeared beyond the Kartak's drift. No distress signal. No debris field. Just a navigation buoy drifting in silence, still broadcasting one corrupted fragment. Don't let them launch. Then nothing. The second expedition lasted longer. 7 days. Enough time to send back footage. The footage was confusing. Planets with oceans. Atmospheres breathable. Cities visible from orbit. And yet no centralized fleet. No obvious planetary defense systems. No unified signal of planetary awareness. One Zalthari analyst actually laughed when he saw it. A pre-space civilization? He said. This is what frightened the outer sectors. Then the laughter stopped. Because the last frame of the recording showed something descending from low orbit. Not a ship. Not a missile. Something like a shadow deciding to become real. And then the transmission ended mid-scream. After that, the Dominion changed its tone. From curiosity to correction. Fleet Marshal Vale Corps stood in the observation chamber of the Dominion's sphere, staring at the Sol system displayed in tactical projection. It looked ordinary. That was what bothered him. No unnatural energy spikes. No obvious warp interference. No massive defense signatures screaming, "Advanced civilization here." Just a yellow star. 8 planets. One of them tagged in red, biological signature, class unknown. Earth. Small. Quiet. Insultingly normal. A junior officer spoke carefully behind him. "Marshal, High Command has authorized full pacification protocol. We are to assume hostile pre-FTL anomaly and proceed with orbital sterilization." Vale didn't answer immediately. He zoomed in on Earth. There were cities. Roads. Ocean trade routes. Weather systems. Life. Too much life for something allegedly harmless. Still, no fleets. No patrol patterns. No deterrent presence. It felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. Like walking into a war room where every weapon had been neatly placed on the floor, and someone was waiting for you to step forward anyway. "Prepare the opening strike," Vale said finally. The officer hesitated. "Sir, no parley?" Vale's mandibles tightened. "Parley is for equals." He turned away from the display. "And legends are never equals." Earth did not respond to the Dominion's ultimatum. Not even a delay. Not even a denial. Just silence. That silence annoyed the Zalthari more than resistance would have. So they escalated. 300 cruisers entered orbit. Then 500. Then a full blockade formation, arranged in perfect geometric dominance over Earth's equatorial plane. Their weapons charged in synchronized rhythm. Space itself began to glow. Then a human voice came through every channel. Not scrambled. Not encrypted. Just open. A man, speaking like he had nowhere else to be. "All right," the voice said. "Before you all do something dramatic and irreversible, I've got a question." Vale narrowed his eyes. He keyed the channel. "You are trespassing on Dominion-controlled space. Identify yourself." A pause. Then a soft chuckle. "Yeah, that's cute," the voice said. "We were wondering when you'd start using the word controlled." The officer beside Vale whispered, "Marshal, how are they on our frequency without?" Vale raised a hand. Silence. The human continued. "You boys ever hear of Earth?" The question hung there. Vale replied coldly, "We are currently orbiting it." "Oh good," the voice said. "Then you're ahead of schedule." That was new. Vale leaned forward slightly. Explain. The voice sighed like a tired teacher talking to a disappointing student. Look, it said. We've been tracking you since you left your home cluster. You're not special. You're just early. That word landed wrong. Early. Not strong. Not threatening. Just early. Vale felt something uncomfortable tighten in his chest plating. That is not possible, he said. Oh, the voice replied. Because from where we're sitting, your fleet looks like a kid swinging a sword in a room full of tripwires. A pause. Then the voice added, almost conversationally. Some of those tripwires bite back. At that exact moment, the Dominion's forward cruiser hegemony breaker detected something entering extreme long-range scan range. At first, the systems flagged it as debris. Then gravitational distortion. Then mass. Then impossible mass. The object was too large for classification. Too structured to be natural. And too silent to be anything the Dominion had ever engineered. Marshal, the tactical officer said slowly, we are detecting additional vessels. Vale frowned. Human reinforcements? No, sir. The screen updated. And for the first time in his career, Fleet Marshal Vale Core felt something very close to doubt. Because space was filling. Not gradually. Not with warp signatures or jump distortions. But like reality itself was being overwritten by presence. Hundreds of ships. Thousands. No, more. Far more. They weren't entering the system. They were already there. They had just decided to become visible. And then the human voice returned, softer this time. Ah, it said. You found the old fleet line. A pause. Then, almost amused. Don't worry. Those ones don't negotiate. The Dominion scanners fully resolved the incoming Armada. Vale's mandibles stopped moving. Because every known threat assessment model in Dominion history failed simultaneously. The analyst whispered, almost praying. 10,000 signatures. Silence filled the bridge. Then the human finished calmly. Welcome to Earth's perimeter. A longer pause. And no, we didn't invite you in. The ships began to power up. Not defensively. Not reactively. But like something ancient and patient had finally been allowed to exhale. Fleet Marshal Vale Core stared at the tactical display as it filled with impossible geometry. And for the first time in his life, he stopped thinking about victory. And started thinking about survival. The Armada that did not arrive, it remembered. The Dominion bridge did not panic. Zalthari doctrine forbade panic. Instead, it did something far more dangerous. It adapted incorrectly. Reclassify all contacts. Vale ordered, voice steady but colder now. They are not unknown vessels. They are hostile fleet constructs of human origin. A pause. Then the tactical officer swallowed. Marshal, that count is still increasing. The display updated again. 10,000 signatures. Then 10,012. Then 10,040. Not because more ships were arriving, but because the sensors were refining. The human fleet wasn't being detected. It was being understood. And every time understanding improved, the number became worse. Like reality itself was admitting it had been underselling the problem. A junior analyst muttered. They're not moving like conventional ships. They're holding formation across multiple gravitational planes. Another snapped. That's not possible. Vale didn't correct them. He was staring at something else. At the lead formation. At the center of the Armada. One vessel larger than the rest, its whole surface shifting like it was made of layered darkness rather than metal. It had no visible engines. No emission trails. No identifiable weapon ports. And yet every Dominion sensor classified it as flagship. The human voice returned again. You still there, Vale Core? The fact it knew his name caused a ripple of unease across the bridge. He answered anyway. How do you know my designation? A soft laugh. Because you're the one standing closest to the glass when it breaks. Silence. Then the voice continued, less amused now. You picked the wrong system. Vale tightened his grip on the railing. Explain your presence. Oh, we've been here a while, the voice said. You just never had the technology to notice. A pause. Then, casually. Not your fault. You were busy expanding. That word, expanding, landed like an insult. Southari empires did not expand. They corrected borders. Vale straightened. We are the lawful dominion of this sector. Another laugh. Shorter this time. Yeah, the voice said. That's what the last 27 civilizations said before they ran into us. The first strike came from the Dominion. It had to. Their doctrine required initiative dominance. 3 Dreadnought-class beams fired simultaneously at the human formation. Each beam was capable of sterilizing a continent-sized surface area in under a second. The energy converged on the human flagship. For a fraction of a moment, space turned white. Then, nothing. No explosion. No scattering debris. Just absorption. As if the attack had been politely accepted and filed away. The tactical officer froze. Impact contained. Vale turned slowly. Contained? Yes, Marshal. No structural damage detected. No displacement of target mass. A beat. Then another officer whispered. It's like it didn't happen. The human voice came back immediately. Oh, it happened, it said. We just didn't feel like reacting to it. That sentence changed the atmosphere on the bridge. Because it implied something no Dominion officer wanted to process. Control, without effort. Then the retaliation began. It did not look like firing sequences. There were no charging arcs, no weapon hums, no visible targeting solutions. Instead, several human ships simply shifted position. And reality bent with them. Southari cruisers began to disappear. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Just unanchored from space. One moment they existed. The next, they were not where existence was allowed to continue. Report! Vale barked. The tactical officer's voice cracked slightly. We are losing contact with Fleet Sector 12. Meaning? They are no longer in detectable space-time. That phrase didn't make sense. And yet the numbers kept dropping. 6 cruisers gone. Then 11. Then an entire strike wing simply ceased to appear on any long-range scan. No debris. No wreckage. No energy signature. Just absence. The Dominion fleet had expected battle. It had not prepared for subtraction. Deep in Earth's command facility, Admiral Hayes watched the live projection with the same expression he had worn for 3 decades of war. Mild disappointment. A technician beside him spoke quickly. Sir, the outer formations are collapsing faster than projected. Their fleet cohesion is breaking. Hayes took a sip of cold coffee. They always break when they realize they're not the apex anymore. The technician hesitated. Should we escalate deployment of the deep assets? Hayes didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the holographic representation of the Southari fleet. Thousands of ships. Still fighting. Still trying. Still believing they were part of a conventional war. Not yet, he said finally. The technician frowned. Sir? Hayes leaned back. Let them understand first. A pause. Then, quieter. Understanding hurts more than losing. Back in orbit, Vale Core was beginning to understand something he did not want to. The human fleet was not reacting to the Dominion. It was correcting it. Every formation they erased wasn't random. It was structural. They were removing command hierarchies. Breaking communication chains. Deleting coordination nodes. The Dominion wasn't being fought. It was being dismantled. Like an engineer disassembling a faulty machine. Vale's voice lowered. They are targeting our command lattice. A tactical officer replied, shaken. That suggests they understand our full operational doctrine. That is impossible. Another cruiser vanished. Then another. The human voice returned, almost conversational again. You know what the funny part is? Vale didn't respond. But the voice continued anyway. You thought you found a new species. A pause. We've been waiting for you to notice us for a long time. Then came the twist. The one no Dominion intelligence had ever predicted. A new signal entered the battlefield. Not human. Not Southari. Something older. Something embedded in the system itself. Every ship, human and Dominion alike, received the same transmission. First contact protocol breach detected. Vale froze. Who is transmitting that? The tactical officer stared at the readout. Marshal, it's coming from the battlefield itself. The human voice went silent for the first time. Then, slowly. Oh. Just that. One word. Not fear. Not surprise. Recognition. Vale felt it then. A shift in the war. A realization forming at the edge of comprehension. This wasn't humanity's first war. And the Dominion had not been the first invader. The voice returned, quieter now. Looks like you woke the neighbors. And somewhere beyond the visible fleet line, something else began to move. The war that was only a message until it wasn't. The transmission didn't behave like a signal. It behaved like a memory resurfacing. First contact protocol breach detected. The phrase repeated across every Dominion ship, every human vessel, every drifting fragment of weaponized space debris, like the galaxy itself had suddenly decided to become conscious of paperwork. Fleet Marshal Vale Core felt something he had never trained for. Not fear. Not confusion. But the sickening realization that his fleet might not be the top of the food chain, or even on the same ladder. Identify source, he ordered sharply. No one moved. Not because they disobeyed. Because every system responding to that order returned the same answer. Origin, system-level autonomous enforcement layer, unregistered. One of the analysts whispered. That's not a fleet designation. Another corrected him, voice hollow. That's infrastructure. Vale's mandibles clicked. Infrastructure of what? No answer came. Because at that exact moment, the human fleet stopped firing entirely. Every weapon. Every maneuver. Every distortion effect. Gone. The battlefield fell into a stillness so complete it felt engineered. And then the human voice returned. Except it wasn't joking anymore. Wasn't relaxed. Wasn't tired. It sounded older. Okay, it said. That wasn't supposed to activate. Silence. Then Vale leaned forward. Explain immediately. A pause. A long one. Then. You triggered an old lock. That sentence alone made several Dominion officers instinctively check their weapons. Lock on what? Vale demanded. The voice hesitated. For the first time, it hesitated. On us. Earth Command Facility, Sublevel Black Archive. Admiral Hayes watched the readouts change color in real time. Blue to amber. Amber to red. Red to something the system simply labeled. Unknown override layer engaged. A junior officer ran in. Sir! The Zalthari engagement has activated dormant containment protocols. Hayes didn't look away from the screen. Yeah, he said quietly. I saw. The officer swallowed. We didn't authorize activation. Hayes finally exhaled. No one alive did. A pause. Then the officer whispered. Then who did? Hayes tapped the console once. The system responded instantly. A line of text appeared. Origin signature, humanity, PRE expansion era, archive directive. The officer blinked. Pre-expansion. Hayes cut him off. Before we went into space, he said, voice flat. We already knew someone else would eventually show up. The officer stared at him. That's impossible. We had no contact. Hayes gave a humorless half-smile. Not contact, he corrected. Expectation. Back in orbit, the human fleet was no longer acting like a military formation. It was acting like a system trying to decide whether it should still be running. Ships shifted position without coordination. Some powered down entirely. Others rotated away from the battlefield as if refusing to look at something. And the flagship, the massive, shadow-layered dreadnought at the center, began emitting a low, unstable gravitational hum. The Zalthari sensors picked it up immediately. "What is that?" Vale demanded. A tactical officer answered slowly. "It's containment pressure." The word made no sense in a combat context. The human voice returned, tighter now. "Everyone listen carefully." A pause. "No one fires anything. Not you. Not them. Nobody." Vale narrowed his eyes. "We are not under your command." The voice snapped back instantly. "You really don't want to finish that sentence." Silence. Then softer. "This isn't a war anymore." Another pause. "This is a quarantine breach." The space between fleets began to distort. Not like weapons fire. Like reality remembering a boundary it was not supposed to cross. Shapes emerged at the edges of perception. Not ships. Not energy. Patterns. Mathematical structures folding through space like invisible architecture. One Dominion cruiser simply ceased transmitting. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Its existence was rewritten to inactive observation status. The analyst screamed. "We are being categorized." Vale turned sharply. "By whom?" No answer. Then the human voice spoke again, almost regretful. "Yeah. That's the problem." A long silence followed. Then, "You weren't supposed to reach this system." The first non-human entity appeared at the edge of the battlefield. It didn't arrive. It resolved. Like a thought completing itself. A vast lattice of geometric light, stretching beyond visual comprehension. It didn't communicate through language. It communicated through restructuring probability. Every ship in the system received the same internal realization. You are in a restricted zone. Vale felt his instincts scream something primal. Not fight. Not flee. But cease existence in this location. "What is that?" he whispered. The tactical officer answered shakily. "Marshal, that is not recorded in any Dominion archive." A pause. Then, even quieter. "Because it is not from the Dominion era." The human flagship pulsed once. A deep, resonant shift in space-time. And the human voice returned, stripped of all humor now. "We need to de-escalate this before it wakes fully." Vale's eyes narrowed. "What wakes?" A long pause. Then the answer came. And it was not aimed at the Zalthari. It was aimed at humanity itself. "The reason you never found us," the voice said slowly, "is because we stopped expanding." Another pause. "We started containing." Earth Command, Deep Archive Vault. Admiral Hayes stared at the same phrase flashing across multiple systems. "Containment layer breach, Sector Sol." A technician spoke quietly. "Sir, the old fleets are reacting." Hayes nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "They heard the knock." The technician hesitated. "And if containment fails?" Hayes looked at the screen showing tens of thousands of dormant human warships beginning to awaken deeper structures, things not classified as ships anymore. Things classified as responses. He answered simply. "Then we remember why we built the locks in the first place." Back in orbit, the battlefield had changed shape. The Zalthari fleet was no longer alone against humanity. Something else was here now. Something older than conquest. Older than empires. Older than war itself. And it was evaluating everyone present. The human voice came one last time, quieter than before. "Vale Core." Vale stiffened. "Yes?" A pause. "You're not the invasion." Another pause. "You're the mistake that showed us the seal is still breakable." Silence stretched across the system. Then the human fleet began to reposition. Not for combat. Not for retreat. But for containment formation. And for the first time since the war began, both sides realized the same terrifying truth. They were no longer fighting each other. They were standing inside something that had been locked away for a reason. and something at the edge of reality was now pressing back against the door. When the door finally remembers why it was closed, the battlefield did not escalate. It collapsed into structure. That was the only way Fleet Marshal Veilcourt could describe it later, though no Zalthari historian ever accepted his report as coherent. Space itself stopped behaving like a stage for war. It became something closer to a sealed chamber. And everyone inside, human, Zalthari, and the unnamed anomaly at the edge of reality, suddenly understood they were no longer participants. They were variables being evaluated. The geometric lattice that had appeared earlier expanded without motion, like a thought finishing a sentence it had started eons ago. Every ship in the system received the same message, not through communication channels, but directly embedded into cognition. Containment layer, compromised. Vale's mandibles tightened. "Explain that," he demanded. No tactical officer answered immediately. Not because they were ignoring him. Because they were reading the same thing across their neural interfaces, and none of them liked what their instincts were screaming. Finally, one of them spoke. "Marshal, this is older than the Dominion." A pause. "Older than known interstellar civilization entirely." The human voice returned, but now it wasn't coming from a single point. It came from everywhere human assets existed in the system. "We didn't want to do this here," it said. Another voice layered underneath it, female this time, clipped, military. "Too late. It's already noticing." Vale narrowed his eyes. "What is noticing?" Silence. Then the human flagship answered. "The thing we buried. Earth Command, Black Vault Core." Admiral Hayes stood alone now. Everyone else had left the room. That was protocol. When systems reached containment breach level 3, command presence became optional. Survival instinct became mandatory. He watched the projection as it changed again. The Zalthari fleet no longer mattered. Human fleet posture no longer mattered. Even the unknown lattice entity had begun to shift, like something testing whether the lock still had structural integrity. Hayes spoke quietly to himself. "You really picked the worst possible door to knock on." A technician's voice crackled over internal comms. "Sir, if containment fails..." Hayes cut him off. "Then we stop calling it containment." A pause. "And start calling it what it always was." The technician hesitated. "A prison?" Hayes' expression hardened. "No," he said. "A lid." Back in orbit, the human armada finally moved in full coordination. Not toward the Zalthari. Not toward the anomaly. But into a formation so precise it looked less like a fleet maneuver and more like a mathematical symbol being drawn across space. 10,000 dreadnoughts. Each one aligning into interlocking gravitational vectors. Each one emitting controlled space-time distortion fields. Each one reinforcing a boundary that had clearly been under strain for a very long time. The Zalthari tactical systems began screaming. "Gravitational inversion detected! Reality shear increasing! Localized physics degradation!" Vale barked. "Countermeasure it!" The officer turned, almost hysterical. "With what, Marshal?" "Their formation is the countermeasure." Then the human voice spoke again, no longer casual, no longer conversational. Now it sounded like someone reading a final warning from an ancient manual. "All vessels," it said. "Maintain position. Do not engage. Do not attempt traversal." A pause. "If you move wrong, you make it worse." The anomaly responded. It had been quiet until now. Patient. Observing. But something in the containment lattice had shifted enough to draw its attention fully. Space near the edge of the system began to fold inward. Not like warp travel. Not like gravitational collapse. Like a hand pressing against the inside of a sealed container. And the container reacted. The human fleet's formation flared. Energy patterns surged through interconnected dreadnoughts like synchronized nervous impulses. The Zalthari saw it clearly now. The humans were not fighting the anomaly. They were reinforcing a lock. And every ship they had ever built had been designed for exactly this moment. Vale's voice lowered. You knew this would happen. The human flagship responded. We hoped it wouldn't. A pause. Then, almost bitter. But hope is not a strategy. The anomaly pushed harder. A silent pressure wave passed through the system. 3 Zalthari cruisers simply ceased structural cohesion. Not destroyed. Not targeted. They were unmade by proximity to something that did not respect their version of reality. Panic finally broke containment discipline. Retreat! Full withdrawal vector! Jump drives offline! Navigation failing! Vale roared. Hold formation! But it was too late. Because the system itself had changed rules mid-conflict. And nobody had signed the update. Human dreadnoughts began to lose energy stability. Not from damage. From strain. The voice returned, strained now, almost human in the worst possible way. Hold the line, it said quietly. Just hold it. Another voice responded, older, calmer. We are holding. A pause. But it's waking faster than expected. Vale listened, stunned. So this thing is alive? A human voice answered him directly. No, it said. Worse pause. It's procedure. The anomaly struck its first real breach attempt. Space ruptured along a seam no one had previously detected. And for a fraction of a moment, something beyond the system looked in. Every ship in the sector received the same sensory impression. Not sight. Not sound. Not thought. Just recognition. Like being seen by something that should have never known you existed. Zalthari's systems overloaded instantly. Entire cruiser clusters dropped offline. Human dreadnoughts flared in response, reinforcing the containment lattice with desperate synchronization. And then the human flagship spoke its final operational command. Not to the enemy. Not to allies. But to the structure itself. CO reset protocol. Silence. Then every human vessel responded in unison. Confirmed. The containment lattice tightened. Space folded inward like a closing fist. The anomaly resisted for one final moment. And then stopped pushing. Not defeated. Not destroyed. Just acknowledged. As if it had been reminded why it had been stopped before. The system stabilized. Slowly. Violently. Then, abruptly, quiet. Fleet Marshal Vale Corps stood on a bridge that no longer felt like it belonged to an empire. The Dominion fleet was shattered. Not entirely destroyed. But fundamentally outclassed by a reality they had not known had rules. He turned slowly toward the human voice. Was that all of it? He asked. A long pause. Then the human flagship responded. No. Another pause. That was it, noticing the door was still unlocked. Silence. Then, almost exhausted. We just closed it again. Earth Command, final log entry. Admiral Hayes watched the system stabilize. Then spoke softly into the record. Zalthari Dominion classified as first contact incidental. A pause. Recommend amnesty observation status. Another pause. And upgrade containment protocols. He looked at the screen one last time. 10,000 human dreadnoughts drifting back into silent standby. Not victorious. Not celebratory. Just waiting again. Hayes added quietly. Because if they found the first lock. He stopped. Then finished. There's always a second door. And far beyond the system edge, in the places no telescope or sensor fully understood, something else continued to move. Not aggressively. Not urgently. Just patiently. Like it now knew where humanity kept the keys.